All righty. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to another edition of One Plus One, your place for inconvenient truth telling and myth busting. It's U.S. election autopsy episode. So, who better than than our returning champion Berneta L. Haynes, who is a consumer advocacy lawyer. She's also a fantastic sci-fi fantasy writer, author of 3 books. She is a black leftist. She's a black queer feminist leftist. And yes, and we're here, abolitionists as well, and we're here to talk about the what took place in the U.S. yesterday, and it's our election autopsy, and it's also our make me want to holler. And if we have time, hopefully we will talk about some uh, queer liberation issues and so forth. So first of all, Berneta, thank you so much for coming back on the program.
Yeah, thank you for having me here. I'm not sure about all those labels, but I think it all just is collapsed within the umbrella of leftism. But yeah, thanks for having me.
Exactly. And no, and honestly, like it really is an honor to have you back on the program. And so, election. Well, the good news is the Democrats lost. The bad news is the Republicans won. So, and
Yeah,
so, uh,
I mean,
before I ask you specifically, I'll just say the following. This is what I was hoping would happen with the U.S. election. Now, even though if I had an American passport and if I was living in the U.S. or even if I was living abroad, I probably would have done the following. I probably would have held my nose and voted for Kamala Harris just to block MAGA republicanism and Donald Trump's far right reign of terror. And if I was living in the US, what that means is afterwards I mobilize like hell against endless austerity and endless imperialism, especially when we're talking about free Palestine and so forth. What happened yesterday was the worst case scenario I think could have ever happened, and because it's Donald Trump, need I say really any more about it? And I
mhm.
was really hoping that the Greens would finally get the 5% nationwide votes that they need to finally get the federal funds they deserve to continue to grow the party and be a real force in U.S. Politics. Donald Trump winning uh, is a huge setback for a lot of things, especially in such a frail, failed state that is the United States. And there are foolish leftists who say he's a peacenik. There are foolish leftists who think it's really not going to be that bad when Donald Trump was in office because we survived 4 years of Donald Trump. And there are leftists, including the best of the left, who I well this is what I hope doesn't happen. I really do not want the next 4 years when Donald Trump does evil shit, whether it's in the U.S. or abroad, that the response of the left, the true left, the best of the left, is, well, Obama did that. Well, Joe Biden did that. Well, Kamala Harris did that. Well, where were you when we were protesting Donald Trump doing that? Like, it's so counterproductive. I pray to God that the Democrats do not attack him for non-existent Russian collusion. We should be attacking him for very real Israeli collusion. So yeah, so that's that, and as Linda source on Democracy Now, this is literally a repeat of 2016. So 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 what's your response to that, and then you can give overall your general impression of over what took place.
Yeah, I'll start with responding to a couple of things you mentioned. Any leftists who are saying that this is a good outcome are not leftist. Any leftists who are saying, "Oh, this won't be that bad. We survived in one time," are not leftists because they're obviously historically illiterate in terms of what um, is very possible with this man getting a second term. I will also say that any leftists who respond to the bad things that Trump will no doubtly do with, well, Obama did that or Biden did that, are misguided to some extent. Yes, it is very important to show a continuation in order to show that these things are systemic and not a problem with one particular individual or one particular administration. Very important to show a continuation like that. But at the same time, if it's just being mentioned as a gotcha, that is counterproductive, like you said. And really, those are just people who are more concerned with being right than anything else. For any leftists who respond to folks' genuine desire to figure out how to get active and counter the problems that we currently have and will have more of under Trump, for folks who respond to those desires with, well, where were you when we were protesting Palestine or so forth and so on, those are not real leftists. Any real leftist should want more people who are genuinely interested in doing the right thing in the movement. So I just want to start with those reactions to what you said. The other, generally in terms of my reactions to this election, I'm not surprised, obviously. I really thought it could go either way. I was of the mind that the first 48 hours after it was announced that Kamala was going to be the candidate, that if we'd had the election right then, she would have won. That's my mindset on this. The excitement and the momentum that we had right after it was announced that she was going to be the candidate, those first 2 days, everybody I talked to was excited. Even if they weren't in love with her as a candidate, even if they knew she might not be super different policy-wise from Biden, there was an excitement around the possibility that she would be movable, for example. And I think people were letting the fact that she is a woman of color, lead them to that kind of conclusion. I think people were just excited to not have to deal with another Biden candidacy. And the fact that we could barely tell the difference between Biden and Trump at some point, especially during that debate between Biden and Trump. So people were very excited. I knew people who were very worried, however, that it was too late in the game to announce her as the candidate. And that, oh my goodness, do y'all really think that a woman can beat him? We've seen this before. But I'm of the mind that if we'd had the election like 2 days, within the 2 days that she was announced, she would have won. But I'm not surprised at how this went. After a while, there started to be a lot of echoes of 2016. Some overconfidence from the campaign, from Kamala's campaign. It was becoming very clear that they were getting way too confident about winning and thinking that they didn't need to actually appeal to the Democrat base and to the liberal base and the left base. And as things kept moving forward, it just became clearer and clearer to me that this is going to be a real toss-up. So the way things turned out on Tuesday, it's very disheartening in some very specific ways. But it's also unsurprising and also not the end of the world. And I think folks are just rattled right now. And as the dust settles, people will hopefully take a step back and recognize, okay, yes, we don't know what's coming and anything is possible in this man's second term, and with a VP like Vance, and with the fact that they have the House, the Senate, the White House, the Supreme Court, most governorships around the country, and most state legislatures around the country, anything is possible. So yes, there is reason to be frightened, but I hope that people will also step back and realize, all right, there's more of us than them, number one. Number two, and I hope leftists can convey this, the Democrats were not doing a stellar job, and a lot of folks have been suffering greatly under their tenure in various states at the federal level. And that ultimately what we're seeing is all a systemic problem that didn't begin with Trump and it won't end with Trump, and that it is up to us to look at the root causes of why we are where we are.
Completely agree with you, and yes, this is very bad, and again, I just hope that we do not have the kind of Trump derangement syndrome that we had last time. There was already sort of echoes of that. There was already a little bit of like echoes of that when and I always hate it when the media does this thing. Oh, Trump loves dictators. Guys, he's an American. Americans support dictators around the world.
Mm-hmm.
Or and they'll often say these kind of like dog whistling things like, oh, Trump is like Kim Jong-un, or he's like Idi Amin, he's like an African tin pot dictator. And it's like, well, who brought those
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
well, I mean,
Wow.
North Korea aside, which I mean, most of the stuff people hear about North Korea are half truths at best or full on fake news.
I feel like we just don't know. I feel like we just don't really know anything objectively about North Korea. Everything we know about North Korea is through our Western news. So, I mean, it's one of those things where I can't draw any conclusion really about what's going on over there, because what do I know?
But if people are going to.
But a lot of people don't think that way. A lot of people, whatever it is our Western media says is true about North Korea, people kind of don't question and they take it as total truth.
But when it comes to comments like Trump is like some kind of African dictator, I would counter that by saying, okay, well, Mobutu, Idi Amin, and so forth, they didn't just fall from the sky. America force fed them onto onto their people.
Yeah, well, I think saying that our white supremacist dear leader is like an African dictator is just on his face racist. Like, why do you have to dig down to find some random dictator from a brown country or a black country to make your point? We have plenty of European examples. We have plenty of American examples. And then number two, these dictators that pointing out in brown and black countries are often people we've propped up in a lot of cases. Not to mention, some of these so-called dictators are not clear-cut dictators the way we've been messaged to believe that they are as well. I'm not saying that about Idi Amin. I don't know enough to speak on Idi Amin. From what I do know, he was a piece of work. But I know when we talk about people like Chavez, for instance, in Venezuela, there's all this, he's an authoritarian, so forth and so on. I personally.
Oh no, not my internet again. Uh-oh. 1 second. Oh no, don't do this to me. Okay, sorry about that. God damn it.
No worries. You'd frozen a few times earlier, but I didn't think you were going to drop out.
Yeah, I'm so sorry about that. There's been so many problems with the internet, but hopefully I can fix that up and edit it when I do need to.
Yeah. I was at the end of it anyway. I was just saying, yeah. I'll let you hit record before I start again.
Okay.
I was totally at the end of
it. Actually, it is still recording, so it's all good.
Oh, it is? Okay.
Okay. All right, so changing subject. So we've already discussed geez. Sorry, I'm completely scared all over.
I know when technological glitches like this happen, it's hard to get focused again.
Exactly. Well, okay. Well, let me ask this question then. Mm-hmm. So Kamala Harris didn't lose. So why do you think Trump won this time? This time around?
Yeah, I think that there are a variety of reasons why she lost and why he won. I think the biggest elephant in the room reason as to why he won is white supremacy and racism. At the end of the day, folks who voted for Trump voted for racism. They voted for white supremacy. Whether or not they consider themselves racist or white supremacists is beside the point. That's what they voted for. Now, interestingly enough, however, on Kamala's side of things, on the Democrat side of things, let's look at what those individuals were voting for, right? They were voting for the status quo. The status quo being widespread homelessness and unmitigated, rising housing costs, unmitigated, inadequate healthcare system with ballooning medical debt, unmitigated.
Something something you work a lot on, actually. Yeah.
Exactly. A ballooning student debt crisis, virtually unmitigated, despite some of the efforts that Biden administration did make successfully to remedy that problem. Genocide, essentially, in Palestine, nonstop colonial aggression by Israel in that region of the world generally, as we see in Lebanon and elsewhere. So, and the Trumpers, the folks who voted for Trump, were also voting for all of those things. Expansion of the police force and greater funding for police. It's very interesting because I feel that when you look at what Trump represents, there's a very clear cut, this guy represents total white supremacy, unvarnished, mask off, no veil, right?
And the worst of and the worst and also the worst of both worlds, because for all those foolish people who keep saying that Trump is some peacenik just because he says one or two things about détente with Russia and not continuing the clusterfuck that is the Ukraine war, which is not doing Ukraine any good.
No.
And the longer it continues, the more that country will never be a united country again. But
right.
But the fact of the matter is, like, Trump murdered an Iranian general. He ripped up he ripped up the nuclear deal, which, even though I don't support it, because why does France, Britain, and the U.S. get to have nuclear weapons? Germany gets to have secret nuclear weapons from the U.S., but Iran can't have nuclear weapons when they're right next door to Israel, the biggest pirate state, rogue state on the face of the planet. But pushing that aside, it was a détente thing to keep peace, and he rips that deal up. He supports Israel 199%. He bombed Syria illegally, continues to allow Turkey to balkanize Syria illegally, while also supporting Kurdish ethno-nationalists who want to balkanize it. So this whole idea that Trump is some peacenik, bullshit. He continues to...
Now, anyone who could make that argument is not making an argument in good faith. Anyone who can make that argument is either flat out lying or they are gullible. End of story. There's no way you could make an argument that voting for Trump was a vote for peace. That is the craziest, most insane thing I've ever heard on all fronts, whether domestically or internationally. It is absolutely insane.
Likewise, from ongoing embargoes to Cuba, which, yes, Biden basically never restored Obama's
and this is the reason why I think it's very important to always draw the connections between what one administration is doing and what the other administration is doing. It prevents you from ever coming to some sideways, dumb conclusion that this particular administration was so much more peace-oriented. Because what you'll see, if you actually look at the whole thing, is that we've never had a presidential administration that was really a peaceful, non-imperial, non-colonial administration. That is part of the fabric of what the United States is imperialism and colonialism. Trump was one more version of that in his first term. He's going to be another horrific version of that in his second term. Kamala, likewise, was going to be another version of that if she had won. Biden has been a version of that. Obama has. I think it's very interesting to try to break down the differences in terms of what Trump people voted for and what Kamala people voted for, because there are some significant differences. But the thing is, those differences ultimately don't have very much material consequence, if that makes any sense. For example, one side voted for police unchecked, just being able to do whatever they want to do. That's the Trump side. The other side voted for police, but with some sort of veneer of reform, and still making sure we give them more money. The material consequence is the same. More Black people will be murdered by cops with impunity. So ultimately, folks are voting for different rhetoric and not for different consequences. And that's the problem I had with this entire election. I could vote for the rhetoric of Kamala, for we're a more inclusive society and we're supposed to be a more inclusive society and so forth. But at the same time, the material consequences are not going to change. We're still going to have Palestinians dying in droves with our tax money contributing to that. We're still going to have cop cities like the one here in Atlanta cropping up elsewhere with the support of Kamala and her party. We're still going to have no fundamental human right to health care, ballooning student loan crisis, all housing costs sky high, grocery costs sky high, all of these things. With Trump, I could, if I'm a racist, if I'm a total racist, I could vote for white supremacy and the idea that we need to protect our country from these foreigners. But that's not gonna help me. There's still gonna be a reality where I see people dying at the hands of cops with impunity, rising house costs with no end in sight, ballooning student loan debt, no human right to health care, Palestinians dying in droves. There was really no fundamental difference that I was able to find in terms of the material outcomes of either of these candidates. The rhetoric is where things really differ. And for me, I can't be satisfied with just voting for rhetoric. I need actual material, tangible changes that benefit all of us and so forth, not just rhetoric that makes us feel better. Feel better doesn't pay my bills. Feel better doesn't keep me from being shot by a cop when I'm pulled over. Feel good rhetoric doesn't keep me debt free whenever I get sick. So tangible things were missing. And I really think it has a lot to do with why a lot of folks stayed home and didn't vote. I think a lot of folks saw nothing here is going to help me. Yeah.
Now that's important because how many people actually simply did not vote? And even if they expressed that they would have liked to have voted for Dr. Jill Stein or Claudia de la Cruz.
Yeah.
I mean, how many people actually just said, F the system, I'm just staying home?
Yeah, I don't know what the actual number is yet. I know that the third party candidates only got a little over 2 million votes altogether. So even if Kamala had gotten all of those votes, it still wouldn't have won her the election more than likely. It certainly wouldn't have won her the popular vote. She still would have trailed behind in the popular vote. In terms of the numbers of people who stayed home, the last I saw was like 20 million or something like that didn't vote, but I'm not sure about that number. Just like eligible people didn't vote at all. I know that when I did some calculations in the swing states, it looked like the swing states had the higher voter turnout. And what it seemed like is that folks in the non-swing states just decided, well, she's not going to win my state anyway, and I don't like him, so I'm not even going to go out and vote, right? Or she's going to win my state anyway, and I don't like her, so I'm just going to not even bother voting. It seems like that's what happened. The staunchly blue states, the few that there are, had fairly low turnout from what I was seeing, compared to Florida, for instance, which seemed to have very high turnout. And then a lot of the very staunchly red states, just people didn't turn out. Texas being a strange exception. It looked like Texas had a pretty good turnout for this election. Interestingly enough, even though it still turned red and so forth because of a lot of problems in Texas, I was seeing indications online that people were having polling problems at the polling places, showing up and being told that the polling place was closed and they had to go to another one and things like that. But the vote turnout was lower than anticipated. And as we know, high voter turnout almost always benefits Democrats. The most important thing Democrats can do is energize their base enough to just show up. Not only is that important for winning the presidential election, it's important for winning down ballot. The craziest part of all of this, when Democrats throw away elections like this, is that presidential elections, that is that they also throw away all of their down ballot elections. it is pretty much a consistent thing that when folks turn out in high numbers to vote for a Democrat candidate because they're really excited about him, those same people are like a captive audience at the booth. And they also just go ahead and vote for the Democrats down ballot, meaning it ends up translating into wins down ballot for Democrats when you have a presidential top ticket candidate who gets people to come out. When people don't come out, or they reluctantly come out, you don't get those wins down ballot. You may just get that person in the booth who just reluctantly votes for the presidential candidate and leaves everything else blank because they just are fed up with the, nothing burger of the party or something, right?
Yeah, and I
And
think
that seems to be what's happened this time, which is how the Republicans have managed to sweep every chamber. So,
and before we go back to talking about Donald Trump, I think it's important then to ask this question, which is, what is both? You already actually talked about this, but let's talk about this a bit more. What is both Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's legacy in the borders of Turtle Island, or the United States, Hawaii and Alaska as we call it, and abroad as an evil empire?
I mean, they are just the next in a long line of administrations that have contributed to climate disaster, um, and the savageries of war. I mean, there's no one thing I can say positively about the Biden-Harris administration, and in terms of a legacy, is that they did implement a policy, short-lived though it was, to reduce childhood poverty, and it was effective from everything I know about it, and that was groundbreaking. The unfortunate part is that it is no longer, right? They also did make a dent in some of the student debt crisis. That's really important. It's not enough. It's not enough. Biden has not utilized the authority that he arguably has in terms of his executive power to actually do more to lift this burden for millions of U.S. Elders who are, strapped with medical debt, as well as younger folks. And I will say the Inflation Reduction Act, I don't like to shout it out too much because I think it got a little bit too much hoopla and credit. There are a lot of nuances and particular issues around that money and how it is being distributed. But the Inflation Reduction Act was an effort to address climate issues and infrastructure issues that are in desperate need of repair and whatnot in this country that we haven't seen another administration do. So their legacy isn't fully terrible. It's about 90%. There are those important things that they have done. But at the end of the day, we're talking an administration that became unashamed of supporting genocide. Just all of us watching this live streamed on our phones, unprecedented kind of experience of genocide, essentially, what we're seeing.
Well, I mean, Israel
The fact that we're able to witness it like this is unprecedented. And then we have an administration that just is so unashamed in supporting it and spouting lies about the people who are the victims of this genocide. We have an administration that came in on the heels of a historic movement against police brutality and did absolutely nothing to address police brutality. We have seen cop murders of people at the hands of police increase since they've been president, since they've been in office and so forth, but yet underreported. So they have squandered some very significant opportunities to turn the tide on how we as a nation address just generally injustices, domestically in terms of police brutality, internationally in terms of an actual genocide. And that's the legacy ultimately that I think they will have in the history books.
Of the Biden of the Biden Kamala Harris, and you know it, I I remember I had Elizabeth Voss Hindmarsh of Consortium News on the program, we were talking about the Epstein human trafficking scandal, which has the CIA and the Israeli deep state written all over it. And she talked about this underreported scandal called the Finders Cult scandal, where these were these kids that were trafficked by a cult that had links to the CIA and so forth. Long story short, though, I was so disgusted and shocked by what I was hearing when you think about that and the Epstein scandal that I just started laughing and saying, wow, the CIA really takes evil to a whole nother level. What Israel is doing currently to the people of Gaza, the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and our
Lebanon.
Lebanese brothers and sisters and our Syrian brothers and sisters, it just takes evil to a whole nother level. And this this is also a historic, unprecedented thing because globally, and we see this largely in the West, there was massive protests of Palestine solidarity from
Yeah,
fucking all walks of life. You had
yeah,
indigenous people coming out of their reservations and so forth, leading marches saying, stop doing this to the Palestinians.
yeah,
There was so much space to say democratic, secular, one state solution. Now, BDS, now on Israel, or at the very, very, very least, an arms embargo
yeah,
on
yeah,
Israel. And from Britain, from New Zealand, from Germany, from France to Canada, but we're talking about specifically the US, the response has been, we're going to send the cops to crack your skulls. We're going to
yeah,
expel you guys at the universities for performing your First Amendment rights. And Palestinians, shut the F up. Your lives do not matter.
yeah, yeah.
Israeli lives are the only things that matter. And look, I'm not a supporter of people who go to a music festival, shoot the place up, and kidnap people. Like,
Right,
but
right.
again, but that being said, international law. I know all those white liberals and so forth who like to be all nerdy about how much they know about international law, but international law is on the side of the Palestinians, and they have every right
Yeah,
to resist their occupiers. And
yeah,
because this is the place of inconvenient truth telling and myth busting, Hamas actually wanted a 10-year ceasefire with Israel and a renegotiation on how we achieve a two-state solution. Uh,
well, and they killed the Hamas leader who was the most eager to end this whole thing and get a ceasefire. So to negotiate.
and
So
then
it's
and then not only that, but the people of Gaza specifically have been met with the most monstrous economic embargo. We're talking Cuban embargo, Iraqi sanctions of mass destruction,
oh yeah.
and the and the Caesar Act on Syria, all put together on the people of Gaza. And all this bullshit that there's liberal Zionists, that there is an opposition in Israel that wants a solution to this.
Yeah.
Dude, even the opposition in Israel, the Labor Party, Blue and White, and Yair Lapid all say the following: we believe in a two-state solution, but we're not going to get rid of all of our illegal settlements in the West Bank and East Jerusalem.
Yeah, I think what I think
And
what I
and the
think
West
what
keeps
we're
propping up the two-state delusion when Palestinians
yeah.
overwhelmingly, Palestinian civil society within occupied slash historic Palestine and the humongous diaspora of Palestinians all say we want BDS on Israel and we want a democratic secular state solution now.
Yeah, I'll be honest, separate the this two-state solution sounds more and more like separate but equal to me. And I can't get behind it. I will say that I feel like I'm
And Bantustans
watching.
and Bantustans, because if you have the two-state solution now, I mean, basically, like you just have all these little mini Palestinian states that are just Bantu
It,
stuff.
it sounds a lot like apartheid still to me. But what I will say is I think that what we're seeing with Israel, I think a lot of us have hoped that there is a real strong resistance within Israel against what's happening. And I think a lot of us have been disappointed to see that there really isn't much of one. And I think there are some interesting parallels to that, what we're witnessing, and honestly, probably what people are seeing of the United States from the outside. I would wager that a lot of folks from the outside were hopeful with this election, for example, that there was a decent amount of resistance against Trump in order to stop him from becoming president, in order to put pressure on Kamala to do the right thing as regards Israel and so forth. And what we saw, and what I, living here, have seen, is that there isn't that much resistance the way we would hope there would be. And so I think what we see with Israel and the United States is what we see with empires, which is that as much as you would hope that the subjects within the empire are aware enough to resist what is very obviously horrific and detrimental to themselves and to the rest of the world, that hope is not well founded. The empire has a really profound way of propagandizing its subjects thoroughly, to the point where any resistance is always a tiny minority. I think we see that in the third party voting in this country, quite honestly. It's always, particularly the third party leftist voting, it's always a tiny minority. Jill Stein didn't even crack past, I think, 0.5% this time around.
And third time was a charm, and that should be the end of
yeah, they should
or
never
even
run
running
her
her own
again.
party.
They should never run her again. I know that Cornel West and Claudia de la Cruz didn't crack even that. So I think, and those votes were from people who were generally the folks within the empire that one would hope there are more of, folks who are anti-genocide, folks who are pro-human rights, vocally and tangibly, not just in rhetoric. But it's a tiny minority. The last time the Green Party hit 5% was Ralph Nader in 2000, if I recall. So
interesting,
and that's why,
and yet they still haven't been able to grow the party.
And that's a lot of that is to do with the problems of the Green Party, the problems of political parties generally in this country. There is too much money that is involved in the way that people think about all of this. There's so much pay to play. And I'm not saying the Green Party is corrupt, like in that particular way. The Green Party is a people funded party for the most part. But there's too much of a, how can we, prop ourselves up as individuals within a party? How can we, monetize this or that thing? And not enough, what are our actual goals? What are we actually trying to change, revolutionize, and fix? So there's a shallowness, to the way our party politics operates in this country. And I think that's got a lot to do.
And they're also, and also, and this is a problem with the left. And I'm not going to talk too much about on the air because I'll probably piss off too many people. But I've been having lots of conversations with certain leftists and colleagues of mine about. Oh, you still there, Berneta?
I'm still there.
Okay,
yeah.
perfect.
I was totally just staring. I was just totally staring at you.
Okay, perfect. No, but like, look, I love Party for Socialism and Liberation. I love and I like the Green Party, even though it would have been nice if it wasn't again Dr. Jill Stein.
Yep, I agree.
What would have been Dr. Cornel West, I didn't support his campaign for lots of reasons. Folks, check out Renee Johnston of Black Liberation Media.
I supported his platform. His platform was absolutely incredible. Yeah.
But
I didn't vote for him.
But as our wonderful elder Daruba, who's also on Black Power Media and Black Liberation Media, says, why are all of you guys having different campaigns when you all should consolidate? United?
The problem with all of this,
and if the Green Party has the structure to try to buck the
Yeah,
two-party system, then PSL Cornel West should have just joined the Green Party.
exactly.
Have a
And
goddamn have
Cornel
a
West
goddamn
was,
primary where everybody chooses who they think
yeah,
should be the best. And if it is Jill Stein, okay, it's Jill Stein.
fine,
If
yeah.
people vote overwhelmingly for Claudia de la Cruz, okay, it's Claudia de
But
la
have a primary. That's the thing that is okay. So let me just say this very clearly. Cornel West was initially a Green Party candidate, and for some reason he left. But my thing is, I'm exactly with you. Why not consolidate? We are in a duopoly system, and these two parties, major parties, have literally all the power, so much that they have made it impossible almost for a third party to have any viability. They put so many barriers in place. So knowing that reality, why would you not figure out a way to consolidate all of your resources, your people, and connections and so forth? It doesn't, and your platforms, because I've looked at all three of their platforms, Cornel West, Claudia de la Cruz, and Jill Stein's platforms, and all of them were wonderful platforms. Each one was missing a little bit of something, though. That was the problem. But consolidated, they were great. My thing is, if these parties want to put themselves out there as if they are the more democratic option, the more people-centered option, why are they not having primaries? Why are they not able to figure out some way to have their own primaries? Maybe without using our particular primary structure that we have in place, because I'm sure the Democrats and the Republicans have made that impossible. But why not figure out a way to democratically select your candidates? Because I feel like I have no idea how the Green Party selects its candidates. It's just that they run and suddenly that person's the candidate. And I have no idea how they select them. And I'll admit I haven't been active in the Green Party because
can't say much about PSL, but did really like
PSL either.
Claudia de la
Like
Cruz still running mate, and
to
it's
me,
sad
there's a
that
lack of
Cornel West
transparency.
just didn't have the just didn't have the patience.
Yeah,
And
there's definitely a lack of transparency in terms of how they're operating, and that's a big problem. And it also lends itself to those arguments that liberals like to make against them. Well, they're just grifters. They come out every 4 years, which isn't true. Green Party runs candidates in every election, but at the same time, their lack of transparency doesn't help like refute those claims, because folks are looking around like, where these candidates come from? How did I not get the vote on this candidate? Um, how did I not get to choose if this person would be our candidate for president? We get to choose, except for in this election, who our candidate would be for president in the Democratic Party or the Republican Party. Except for in this election, which, by the way, a lot of people had problems with. And I understood people's problems with the fact that they didn't have any say-so on who became the Democrat candidate. But that transparency issue is a very big problem for the third parties, and the lack of consolidation and all this sort of division doesn't work in our favor as leftists in a duopoly system. It's
and
just
that
crazy.
and before we talk specifically about what to expect from Donald Trump, I think this conversation does need to be had, which is uh which is this bizarre thing of the left where they tear each other apart as opposed to actually uniting and advancing itself. And there's a big problem with the white left, with the largely
And
with
where do you see the left tearing itself apart? Because I will say I left Twitter in the dust a long time ago. I spend more time on Threads and Reddit. And I will say that I don't see as much of that on the left. What I do see are liberals in these spaces that cosplay as leftists tearing people apart. But I don't see that on the left as much. I do see the racial division
okay,
on the left.
so very quickly, because I know we actually are pressed for time. So very quickly, and then we'll talk very quickly about about Trump, what to expect and how to resist. So I know lots of Black leftists, Latinx leftists, certainly the other part of your community, queer liberationist leftists, complain that the largely white cisgender left keeps bitching and complaining nonstop about identity politics, and they keep
Oh
recycling
yeah.
right-wing dog whistle bullshit about how
Yeah.
they're tired of wokeism and stuff like
Oh
that.
yeah.
Uh, was there a lot of that happening in the real world, or that's just in the online world then?
I think that is really truly the online world.
Okay.
Um, I really think a lot of that is people who need to touch grass, quite honestly. Like they are entirely too online. I will say that, however, though, that some of what we see from so-called leftists who are critiquing identity politics and wokeism, what we need to recognize is that those people aren't leftists. Like they're not. If you have a problem with people being woke per se, you aren't. There's no way you're a leftist. Okay, like there shouldn't
In
be an
fact,
issue.
in fact, can you even explain what the term woke is? Because
I, you know,
back in your Twitter days, I can't believe I didn't screenshot this, but there was some black leftist that was saying, "Man, y'all white people ruin everything
and they
because
do,
of the term
and they
woke."
absolutely do, because woke that goes back so far. Like this is one of those things where if you know black culture, it needs no explanation. Like anybody could tell you that they've heard the term, stay woke. And people, black people, we use this phrase in all kinds of random flippant ways and whatnot. And it just so happened that in the 2010s, on Twitter and whatnot, as folks were talking about systemic important issues, police brutality and whatnot, folks was like, you need to wake up. We need to wake up to what these problems are. And stay woke, was a phrase that got thrown around a lot because that's a phrase that's always been in Black American culture. All of a sudden, white folks got a hold of it and they're like, oh, woke, woke. And suddenly it's a problem to be woke.
All
And
because Hillary Clinton used it once, and all
well,
because these
and
people are
Obama
pissed off,
too.
and all because Hillary Clinton uses the term once, and now it's just we hate having female characters on Star Wars.
Yeah, they really
Why do
boiled
we need
woke
to have
down.
black queer people? And it's just
Yeah.
dog whistling for real
Yeah.
life trans people and so forth.
Yeah, people they really turned woke into like something that is nobody was thinking that seriously about this word. It is just a Black English word, like a AAVE word. But yeah, it's just one of those things. So if you understand what it means to just be woke and aware of what's happening around you and of the systems in place around you, then you should have no problem with the idea of someone being awoke. Why would I be mad that someone's aware of the problems? So any leftist who's saying, "Oh, these woke people," that's not a leftist. And I think it's very important that we're talking about a lot of
To
online
say that
people.
more.
Yeah, we're talking about a lot of online people, most of whom we don't know. So we don't know how many of these people who say they're leftists are actually not there just to be chaos agents within the left. We don't know how many of these people are out there just literally to create chaos within the left. We have a whole legacy in this country of the powers that be figuring out how to infiltrate spaces and create utter chaos. So, and if we're dealing with all these people online who are mostly just profiles and people we've never seen in person, talk to, really know, we're making a lot of assumptions that they're genuine and legitimate. And I think we need to start paying attention to the things they actually say and whatnot, and start recognizing that that's not no actual leftist would believe that or would say that or use those kinds of terms in that way. So I became very, very aware on Twitter and elsewhere of when somebody was not operating in good faith. It just became really clear to me. I paid very close attention to a pattern of behavior and words. And it started to be very obvious to me that we had a lot of so-called leftists who were really just there to create chaos.
If I can squeeze two more questions before you go, can I do that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
So then last two things then. That's actually very reassuring then. So I myself need to move to the US and Canada. That way I can get out of the online world. So then last two things that we have to talk about is is this. Uh so the Democrats did lose because look, things are just not getting any better, and you can have a positive campaign, but things are not getting any better. And for the
Mhm.
first time, this was their moment to at least say we're going to stop arming Israel, and we're going to critically reevaluate this special relationship. The fact
Yeah.
that they just didn't do that and literally kept doing two fingers to the Palestinians,
Yeah.
In that case, they deserve to lose Dearborn. But
Yeah.
then, but in that said, I just don't know. We have to find a way to break this two-party system, because even though the Democrats deserve to lose because of their complicity in Palestinian genocide,
We
we have the
also don't deserve
Republicans,
Trump.
though.
Yes.
We have the Republicans, and we're
Yes.
going to see that in Canada.
Yes.
I think Justin Trudeau and the Liberal Party, uh, no matter who props them up, NDP or Quebec Bloc, are going to lose for their complicity in the Palestinian genocide. But then we
Yeah.
have the Conservative Party, who are worse
And
than
our
the
and
Liberal
look,
Party, just like the Republican Party, are worse than the Democrats when it comes to the Palestinians, both on paper and in practice.
yeah, and look, I'll say that you're right. We have to break the duopoly, because just because the Democrats deserve to lose doesn't mean we deserve
To
Trump.
lose with them.
That's the problem. There's no good alternative, and this lesser of two evils is just not working, and it never worked, and it never should have been a way of seeing things in the first place. The other thing I'll say is that I'm not entirely confident enough to say that the genocide is why the Democrats lost.
Okay.
I will say supporting it didn't do them any favors. Supporting it did not do them any favors. I'm sure there's a large segment of people who stayed home or voted, or, who stayed home, honestly, because of that. But I think there are so many other material, like domestic reasons as to why they didn't win. I mean, I will tell you, going to the grocery store is kind of heartbreaking. I'm gonna be plain honest with you. Every time I go, and I'm comfortable enough not to really have to worry about this. Every time I go and get groceries, I cannot believe how much it costs. I am floored at my receipt every single time. And I'm sitting here thinking, I'm comfortable enough. What about the people who aren't comfortable at all, or who are just a little bit comfortable? This is crazy. The housing costs. Everyone I know who's renting, the stories that they tell me about their rent costs going up 1 month from, $500 1 month to the next. It's insane. There's no rent control at all. So I really think a lot of the tangible things, the material realities here in the United States is really what did the Democrats in, because they didn't address any of them. Every time they were asked a question about it, they were like, oh, well, the economy is actually doing great. We have inflation's down. That doesn't mean anything to anyone who's going to the grocery store and looking at $7 eggs. That doesn't mean anything. Anytime they were asked about unemployment and so forth, which is insane. Trying to get a job right now, this is the worst job market. Insane. Anytime they were asked about it, they're like, well, employment is at its, unemployment is at its lowest it's been in, 5 years or something like that. That doesn't mean anything to someone who's been looking for a job actively for over a year and putting out hundreds of applications and hearing nothing. That doesn't mean anything. So I think the material consequences and the material realities here did them in, unfortunately, more than the genocide and supporting the genocide did. I think that definitely played a role, and they probably lost a lot of voters who just sat at home because of the genocide. But a lot of people just sat at home because they're like, voting for either one of these people is not going to take down the cost of groceries. I'm still not going to be able to afford my rent, and my prescription costs are still too high.
And
It's really that simple. It's really that simple.
Last thing I want to ask you about, and that is Donald Trump. How this guy manages to get the support he gets. And you're right, it is because of white supremacy. It is because of a dominant far right media, which Fox News is just the tip of the iceberg, because they got everything. I mean, Elon
Yeah.
Musk is supporting all sorts of far right movements, like in Brazil and elsewhere. They
Right.
do know how to mobilize. They do know the meaning of solidarity, and and a lot of those places that Trump won, like Pennsylvania and so forth, are dominated by far right media.
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah.
Uh, but also, has America itself just normalized far right shockness to the point where
Oh, yeah.
uh, to to the point that people can't even motivate themselves to vote for the Democrats to block Trump but then mobilize like hell against their endless austerity and imperial agenda.
Well, I will say that I think that this sort of shock jock culture has definitely been normalized. I think it's why we saw so many young Gen Z men in particular voting for Trump. They've grown up with all these kind of Rogan shock jock types of personalities, and Andrew Tate's and whatnot, informing their sense of masculinity.
South
So of course
Park.
we voted for Trump. So I definitely think we've normalized it. I think we've also normalized it on the other end of the spectrum, though, with the liberals, who, you know, they also are getting it from the Joy Reids of the world and the people and the women on the View and all this, who spout half truths and or lies that demotivate the average liberal from thinking they actually need to mobilize and push the Democrats further to the left. So we're getting it on both ends. I think the shock jock culture on the right, on the far right side, is so extra disturbing just by nature of the things that come out of their mouths most of the time. So it justifiably gets more attention from those of us on the left who are like, we got to do something about these kinds of people. Folks listen to those individuals and they don't even bother fact checking, verifying, picking up a book and trying to read and find out otherwise. They just like, Rogan said it, Tate said it, whatever, that's what it is. And it's part of the problem of celebrity culture in the United States. Americans have a celebrity obsession, and it's on all wings, sides of the spectrum. I saw it with leftists and Bernie. They were obsessed, and they were not thinking clearly about some of the limitations of Bernie as well. They kind of got a little obsessed. I saw it with
look how many of us fell for Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah, and the number of people who fell for Tulsi. I see it with the Trumpers. I've seen it with the AOC stands. Like there's a celebrity culture that is very corrupting to the mindset of a lot of Americans. It's demotivating in terms of convincing people that they don't need to fact check. This person is totally a Messiah type truth teller. And that if they tell me everything's all good, then I don't need to mobilize and make the Democrats do better. If they tell me everything's all terrible, then I totally need to vote for Trump, who's our Batman, who's going to save us from those crazy foreigners. So I think
an Elon Musk who people literally think is a real life Tony Stark Iron Man, or that Trump that Trump's not a villain, he's an anti-hero like the Joker. Like,
yeah, I just think people don't, we as a culture just are not invested in truth seeking, and that is really a problem, because if we were, I don't think we'd fall for this kind of celebrity BS the way that we do. I don't think we'd fall for these shock jocks like Rogan and all this stuff. We would seek truth, and we're just not a truth seeking culture, despite being a culture that prides itself on truth tellers, which is funny. That's the weird irony of it all. We love a truth teller, which is how people view Trump, right? But we're not truth seekers, and we just kind of like passively absorb all this information from folks, and we're overworked.
And then our idea of stand-up comedy. I mean, I'm wearing George Carlin, who explicitly, I mean, he would defend the right of a Howard Stern, of any of those guys, including Dave Chappelle. Let them say whatever they want. There are two knobs on the radio. But it's very important that people know this about George Carlin. He also explicitly said comedy should be about punching up, not about punching down, which is why he, an old school lefty hippie, did spend most of his time attacking the far right, mocking Bill Clinton. And yet these stand-up comedians, they know this about Carlin. They claim they love George Carlin. They even praise when he attacked the Reagan administration, but they still spend more time bullying the trans person, making fun of the fat person, bullying the trans person, making fun of of the overly sensitive black person. And then if you look at a show like South Park, that is an animated alt-right cartoon, and Donald Trump is just a real life Eric Cartman.
He's just like an embodiment of it, and that's exactly what I'm getting at. All we do as a culture is kind of like be entertained. and we absorb these things, and we think of some of these people as truth tellers, and when we ourselves should be the ones seeking truth, not just waiting for somebody to tell us the truth. Like, we're just such a passive kind of culture in the way that we move through the world. And there's a lot of reasons for that we could get into a whole nother conversation of. But a lot of it is the fact that Americans are very, very overworked. We live in a very precarious system where we are always on the edge financially. And so people don't really feel like they have the mental space and the actual time to go seeking out truth, to go find these books to read and figure out how to build community with people, to learn more about people's lived experiences and all this stuff. They just want the short route. And that's not to make excuses. That is to explain why I think we're in a really effed up state of affairs that we're in right now, with the next 4 years looking extremely problematic. And honestly, there's just no telling what's coming next for us. And I hope people are ready, is all I can say.
Well, here's hoping the left gets its shit together, and for the people who and for those white leftists, or can even be black male leftists, who think that there's too much wokeism going on, that there's too much identity politics.
Yeah.
I don't know, guys, just shut the fuck up and fine, go do your thing. Let us then let us people who know how to chew gum and walk at the same time, which is, I don't even have to understand about trans and non-binary people, but I'm going to protect them from far-right assholes.
Yeah.
Is that really too much to ask? But anything you want to say, Berneta, before I let you go?
As usual, thank you for having me here. I'm hoping that all of us can learn from what we've had to experience this week and maybe grow from it, like we've been talking about. But yeah, thank you for having me here as usual. And I guess for anybody who's watching, if you want to read some sci-fi that gets into political things, just go to BernetaHaynes.com and you'll find all of my work, some of which I've co-written with my partner.
And guys, if you're a struggling writer, yes, do visit Berneta's website and Waking Writers, right?
Yes, that's my blog site, Waking Writer, for struggling writers and newbie writers.
And also check out Berneta on Threads. I'll make sure to post that link. Until then, we are joined on this edition of 1+1 with Berneta L. Haynes. We are signing off. And folks, yes, we are on the road to nowhere. As Frank Zappa would say, the torture never stops. As George Carlin would say, life is worth losing. But I say, keep calm, carry on. And no, as Bob Marley says, get up, stand up. I continue. We have to continue fighting. What other choice do we have? And we cannot leave, and we have to go down with some dignity.
Absolutely.
Till then, folks, peace out. Power to the people. Good night and good luck.